All right, let's get started. Today we're going to talk about using Study Island for RTI interventions. And this is just some strategies you can use for your classroom. So let's go ahead and jump into the agenda. Briefly, we're going to look at what RTI is, and I'm going to give you a definition as well as some benefits. Then we're going to move into looking at the RTI model. We're going to, it shouldn't be new to anyone here, but we are going to be working off that model today, so I do want to share that with you. I also will be talking about how Study Island can support RTI and what features are within the program and tools that you have available to use in an RTI implementation. And then I'll show you how you can implement Study Island in your RTI approach. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So RTI, our response to intervention, is a multi-tiered instructional intervention approach designed to identify, target, and address learning and behavioral needs of a student. And it does it by increasing frequency and intensity as greater needs are revealed. So all that definition says is that it's a multi-tiered approach and it's used for intervention to identify, target, and address student learning and behavioral needs. And it does it in two ways, and that's increasing frequency and intensity as greater needs are revealed. So with that said, let's go ahead and talk about the 4 benefits or essential components of RTI. Number 1, you need to have high quality research-based interventions. Nothing new there. What you're doing with your students needs to be a research-based approach with statistically significant results. You also need to have ongoing student assessment. So that just means that you need to be not necessarily testing your students frequently in like a formalized test, but making sure you have those formative assessment checks, those interim assessment checks, those things like that. And that can be as simple as having your students raise their hand if they don't know the answer, or if they do know the answer, or doing a think, pair, share, or something like that. Any type of ongoing student assessment. You also need to have tiered intervention and instruction. So we mentioned that RTI is a multi-tiered approach. So for each tier, you need to have defined what qualifies for each tier and have a instructional plan or model created for each tier. And then finally, parent involvement, just making sure that the students and their parents also know what's going on so that you can have different or external partners, as you know, your parents are working with the students to make sure that they have that holistic support there. So with that said, let's go ahead and look at the RTI model. And this shouldn't be new to you, but it is a 3-tiered system, starting with tier 1 that encompasses 80 to 90% of your students. That's just traditional classroom instruction, high quality research-based, and rigorous, relevant, and standards-driven. We're going to talk about how Study Island can meet that tier very briefly, because it is that traditional Study Island, traditional classroom. But we do have some of that in today's webinar. We also will talk about tier 2, which is that targeted level, and that encompasses 5 to 15% of your students. And this is where you start to individualize your support for underachieving students. So included in that tier 2, you want to have standards-based curriculum and supplemental instruction. You also want to have some remediation of the specific skills or concepts and individualized interventions that are differentiated, scaffolded, and targeted to each student. So we're going to look at how you can do that in Study Island as well. In tier 3, we have the intensive level, and this encompasses just 1 to 5% of your students, but it's very individualized. You're going to use one-on-one group or one-on-one intervention, small group intervention. It's happening outside of the classroom. You're really going to get intense on those skill-specific interventions. We have reports that can help you track and monitor that intense skill-specific intervention for those underachieving students. So some of the benefits of using RTI is, 1, you identify struggling students, so you know immediately who you need to pull into your 2 tiers. And then you can differentiate instruction for them to make sure that they're getting exactly what they need in a way that makes sense to them, whether that be your instructional practice, whether that be the content they receive or how they receive it. You can really differentiate for your students there. We also have the benefit of improving your own instructional practices. So as you're intensifying how you teach to the student, you're trying new approaches to help them understand that information, which is in turn making you a better or a more equipped instructor. And then you can also leverage the partners that are not in your classroom. So whether that be a teacher, whether that another teacher, a co-teacher, whether that be a parent, whether that be any SPED or paraprofessional aides that need to be a part of this process, you get to work with them, your students get to work with them and get hit at every level. And ultimately, you fill the knowledge gaps of all your students, which is awesome. Okay, so let's talk a little bit now about how you can start incorporating Study Island into your RTI approach. So I want to just give you a brief explanation of what Study Island has within it in order for you to use it with RTI. Number one, Study Island is research-based and it provides standards practice and assessment and an assessment solution. So basically, if you haven't heard already, our product has been validated by the Marzano Research Group, and we're going to talk about it as we go along. But I do want you to know that it is backed by research, and your students, if they use it with fidelity, can see growth in their practice and assessments. Also, Study Island has some built-in remediation topics. These are called building blocks in Study Island. You may have heard them before. Basically, how they work is when your student is on an on-grade level skill or on a skill that you have provided to them, if they earn a 40% or below, a building block scaffolds them into a remedial topic, and then they can work their way back up. We also provide individualized interventions that you can use. I'm going to mention NWEA MAP here because that is a solution where you can basically have your students take the NWEA test and put those results into Study Island to give them that individualized learning path. We also have some more individualized options as well, but NWEA is the closest you're going to get to a learning path for a student. We also have continuous progress monitoring. I said that wrong. Continuous progress monitoring that you can do on your students. So you want to know if they're getting better and if your intervention is working. So we have a report, a really nice one that you can use for continuous ongoing progress monitoring. And then finally, adjustable student accommodation settings. So if your students need some type of accommodation, accessibility accommodation, or anything like that, we have that available in our student settings area. I'll show you where that is, but basically you can modify whether or not they're being read to. You can modify the difficulty of their assignments. You can modify their passing goal. So many accommodations you can make to help scaffold them to where they need to be. All right. Now we're almost through the slides and into the product, but I do need to talk about the different tiers and just highlight high level how you can use them. So tier 1, again, is traditional Study Island. It requires traditional high quality instruction, which Study Island has as a standards-based program. It also involves rigorous, relevant, and standards-driven content, which again, Study Island is standards-based. So that's one of the reasons why you should use it. And then also some best practices when you're using tier 1. Again, it is traditional Study Island, so you can use it. But I do want to point out that we have some validated research by the Marzano Group. And in that research, we found that just 30 minutes per subject per week in these subjects here, math, ELA, and reading, 30 minutes of practice per subject per week with fidelity shows growth for students using Study Island over non-Study Island users. So on your state summative assessments, if your students are using Study Island, 30 minutes per subject per week, we have validated research showing that it will be a success. So that's just standard Study Island. If you're interested at all in using Study Island in a traditional classroom and need a Getting Started workshop, feel free to head over to our live workshops page. We have a recording on the Getting Started workshop. We also have a YouTube page that I'll give you the resource to at the end of the workshop. All right, next we have Tier 2 intervention. This again encompasses 5 to 15% of your students. It's including those individualized supports for underachieving students, standards-based and supplemental content. You're going to have your remediation of specific skills or concepts, and then you're going to differentiate learning, a scaffold and target learning for each student. So what that looks like in Study Island, and this is where I'm going to slow down a bit, and that's because in Tier 2 intervention, you're going to start grouping your students. And you group your students based on the data you've seen in Tier 1. So when you're grouping your students, what you can use as a feature to group students is actually the regular old simple create a class. And classes can be created, you can create as many classes as you like. They can be created for multiple grade levels, multiple subjects. Classes in Study Island are really just a container. If you've never noticed, you don't have to select a subject or select anything when you're creating a class. All you have to do is give it a title and put some students in it. So you can use that when you're grouping students. Find the students that are in Tier 2, put them into a Tier 2 class, as you'll see I do, and then you can start using some of the different functions to tailor their assignments, like Sensei, which is a great, quick, fast way to give assignments and monitor and track students. So we'll look at that. And then also in Tier 2, let's go ahead and add our parents into the mix. I'm going to talk to you and show you parent notifications, where you can set up some emails, some, of course, notifications to be sent to parents so that they're alerted of anything you do within that class. So let's go ahead and look at that. I'm logging in as a teacher. And where is this coming from? All right, let's log in as a teacher. Here I am. First thing I'm going to show you, I'm not going to show you how to create a class because you can actually go right here to the Help Center, scroll down to create a class, and watch a video on it. I'm actually just going to show you the class I already created. And again, add new class loads here if you need to create one. But I'm going to go to my class manager. And you'll see I have a few classes here. I have my general class, and then I have my Tier 2 and Tier 3 RTI classes. I'm going to click on that class, the Tier 2. And one thing I want to show you is that if you look here, the class is called, for my students, Ravenclaw. But on my class properties page and how I see my class is under the class title, and I see RTI T2. And so what I like to point out about this is that you can change, if you are grouping your students and your students are known with some type of nickname for their small group, you can always change that under this class page header, which is really nice. Kind of makes you incognito James Bond when you're setting up your class or your RTI classes, because they don't really need to know what group they've been put in and why. All right, so that's one thing I want to point out about classes. The other thing that I want to point out while we're here is the parent notifications, which lives in this third tab here. So parent notifications allow you to send your parents, so you do have to put in the parents here for your students, but if you have a spreadsheet with parent contact information and it's not already here, you can actually just give this over to your administrator, give that spreadsheet over to your administrator, and they can bulk upload your parent contact information. And they can contact our customer support department if they need help with that. But I already have mine listed here, so I can actually just come and create a notification. You see I already have 2 set up here. If I click Add Parent Notification, I'm given some notification types. So I can set up an assignment creation alert for parents. So each time I create an assignment for my Tier 2 group, they'll be notified. Assignment due, reminder, overdue, those type of things. I can send blue ribbons. So each time your student does well on those practice assignments that you give, you can, and they earn a blue ribbon, you can notify your parents. You can notify them about low scores so that they can work with them, with their students, or I'm sorry, their sons or daughters at home. And you can also do something called suggested topics, which we'll talk about briefly in just a second. So if I want to do the low score warning, I can just name it whatever I like because parents don't see the notification here. So I'm just going to call it low score warning T2, Tier 2. You choose your frequency. So let's just say I do it weekly. You choose the time you're going to email it. I'm going to do it right after school at 4 o'clock. You choose your start date. I'm going to do today and then for the next 3 weeks. There we go. And then you choose the day you want it ran on. So I'm going to go with Wednesday, because by the middle of the week, maybe they have, that gives them some time to work towards getting a higher score. Next, I'm going to choose my program, which is just your standards. You can do it for all subjects, or you can be subject specific. So I'm going to go ahead and do math. You'll choose this section just alerts you to how many, or alerts the parents to how many questions their students needed to complete. So I'm just going to do 10 and what score they needed. I'm going to do 80 there. Then you get the option to choose your recipients. You can choose all parents, a group of parents. I'm going to just choose all parents. And then if you want to see what it looks like, you can always preview it. It says, dear parent of, it has the student's name. It tells them, you know, your student has made a low score, below 80%, and it tells them what topic and subject to look in. And it also just tells them how to pull a report for the student, so that for the low score report, so that they can kind of identify which assignment it was on. Okay. So I'll just hit submit there. That looks great. I see it down here. So my low score warning for the next 3 weeks, weekly, every Wednesday at 4. Perfect. So you have to do nothing else there. Now I'm going to go over to Sensei, so I can show you how to individualize assignments for students. And right now, I'm looking at, if I look at current program and class here, I'm looking at first grade standards, but this is my general class. Since I want to look specifically at T2, I can set that there. And if I want them to always be the one that shows up, I can set it as my default view here. And then there we go. So now I'm looking at my Tier 2 students. I can see their subjects. If I wanted to drill down, each of these colors mean something, and you can always refer to the quick reference card, I believe what it's called, to see what those color codes mean. And you can also just toggle through to learn more. All right. So say I'm concerned about reading. Like, reading is what we're doing some intervention on at the moment. And I need to click into reading to see where I need to target and identify my struggling students. So this red or pink color points means that there's something going on here. This here, if you read, it says number of students with blue ribbons per topic. Right now I have 0 students with blue ribbons, and it's red, which means that none of my students are passing. So I'm going to click into print and spoken words, and I can see those 3 students who are struggling. Now they're already grouped because there's only 3 and they're all struggling. But if they weren't grouped, if I had some green and some blue, I could just click this 3 here and it would group them together. Then from there, I can just click the assign button. And this is when you would want to pull your students aside before you assign and go through and reteach and do that intervention that you have planned. And then once you do that, you can give them an additional practice assignment. And then you can select some students, you can remove students. The 3 I have is already selected, so I'm gonna hit assign. All right, and it tells me that that assignment was successfully created. Super easy. But one thing I do recommend you do as a best practice, if you are re-giving a topic to students to practice some more, I recommend going to edit new assignment and turning this enforce states on. Basically what this does is it tells the data related to the assignment to filter itself between this date. So that just means if the student worked on this assignment, say last week, this assignment will specifically only look for data within this date range because I turned the enforce states on. If I turn it off, it will pull in or filter in the assignments or the scores that the student earned on that topic from last week or whenever prior. So always just go in and turn that on if your students if your students have worked on the topic previously and you don't want them to see their old score. So I'm gonna go ahead and save. Always make sure you save. And that's done. I can see that additional practice here under class assignments for RTI. All right, so now that we have individualized assignments, group students, let's go ahead and move on to Tier 3. And Tier 3, again, is that individualized intensive support intense skill-specific interventions, one-on-one and small group that happens outside of the classroom, excuse me, and it is the 1 to 5% of your students. So in Study Island, Tier 3 looks like individualized assignments, and again, you can tailor those through Sensei, or you can use the class manager and just add an assignment for student assignments. You can also use the suggested topics area, which I'm going to show you in just a second. You can use building blocks, which are those remedial topics that I talked about earlier, and you can use NWEA map, which creates a learning path. This is also the time for you to leverage partners, whether that be external, well, definitely external outside of the classroom. So let's go ahead and look at what that looks like. All right, so outside of the classroom, think in terms of sharing your students' information with other stakeholders or other teachers. If I go under class properties here, I have this co-owner area where I can add co-teachers, paraprofessional aides, anybody who needs access to the data or the assignments that my student is working on that's intra-school but not in the classroom. You can add up to 10 there, and they'll get access to reports, assignments, and the ability to work with your students through your class. So you can add up to 10 there. Just always make sure you're safe. All right, now I also talked about building blocks, and we're still in Tier 2. If you know, building blocks have been turned off for the school, but you need to turn it on for just your RTI class, you can turn that on. You just got to override school preferences. Mine is already on. If this said no, you would just turn that to yes, and that would enable building blocks. Now, speaking of building blocks, I'm going to go ahead and log out and then log in as a student. Speaking of building blocks actually exist on the students' topic sheets. So I'm going to go ahead and go to a topic sheet. I'm going to go to My Classes, and then I'm going to go to the building block for my Tier 2 class, which is just called Hufflepuff for this student's group. Just kidding, he has no assignments. Let me go actually to a place where I know there are a building block there, and it'll look the same as what you're seeing here. All right, so here we go. So you can see right here, there's a hazard symbol, and then there is a scaffolded topic under it. So this is a building block actually, and the building block was attained because the student earned a 40% or below. Now, the student got the building block and actually earned a 30%, but since this student actually earned this on the first grade level, this scaffolded item is 1 grade level below, so that's kinder, and under kinder is pre-K, which is what they would have gotten a building block for. However, Study Island doesn't support pre-K implementations or pre-K content, so that is why the student doesn't have an additional building block. Now, the building blocks can be seen on the instructor dashboard as well, but basically this student needs some type of intervention that involves a teacher and one-on-one attention. So once the student gets that building block, they can do worse on it. However, if they do better, this is again lower difficulty, they'll be moved back onto the on-grade level topic where the goal is for them to earn this beautiful blue ribbon. Building blocks earn white ribbons, and then on-grade level topics earn blue ribbons. Now, if I take you back to the home page here, I want to show you these suggested topics. These are topics where the student has earned a 40% or below, and they need some additional practice. So they're not necessarily building blocks, but they are the on-grade level topics that the student did poorly on and needs some type of practice and attention on. It just pulls them out. This area just pulls it out so that students can take advantage and kind of see within a glance which topics are the ones they need to practice. So it's a great area for homework, for tutoring, for any breaks that they just need to focus in on a skill that they know they've been struggling on. Suggested topics is a great place, and you can always just change by subject. Uh-oh, before I log out, which I've already done, I'm getting click happy here. I do also want to show you the NWEA path, so I'm going to click on My Classes. And I'm going to go to the My NWEA Learning Path. And then again, this is an assessment that they take outside of Study Island that you can use the results to create a pathway within Study Island. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Josiah's math topics. And on Josiah's end, this just looks like a topic sheet of topics. So I can see, but these are the ones specific to Josiah and his results. Now, if you pay attention over here, some of these, if you look over here, this is all 4th grade. But down here is 6th grade and 2nd grade and 4th grade. These are the standards. Josiah would have no idea what that is, but if you were looking at a student sheet and you were kind of wondering what grade level it was, you could always look over and see that. Or if you're in as a teacher, which I'm going to log right in as a teacher, you could actually go to the school reports area, click on the NWEA report. I'm going to do the individual student path. He was in tier 3. I can then choose my student, and it was math. If I view the report, it gives me that same topic sheet, and I can always look at his scores there, but it also indicates the grade level for the teacher. So grade level 4, grade level 4, 6, 2, and 4. Okay. So that's just one way you can individualize for students. Okay, so I'm going to jump back into our presentation, but before I do, and since I'm on the teacher end, I do want to incorporate some of those accommodations you can make. So if I go to this teacher page and I look under student settings, which is right here under class links, I can actually make some accommodations for the students so that they they're scaffolded into the right area. So I can adjust the passing goal for my students, which is changing the number of questions and percentage they need. I can also restrict access to easier or harder material. So what that looks like is, right now I have a class. If I only wanted Mackenzie to focus on 2nd grade material in her independent practice, I could do that here. I could also hide the grade level from the student. I could modify practice sessions. So in here, I could reduce the number of answer choices by 1 so that the student would only see 3 answers instead of 4. And then I can turn on the read aloud. So if they need that audio support, I can turn that on for the students. And I can do that for all subjects, just one subject. And I can, choose that way. Now, I didn't really show adjust passing goals, so let me just show you really quickly what that allows you to do. So adjust passing goal, you select your program in your class, and then you can change, this is independent practice, but you can change the number of questions. And so if I wanted this to be 15 questions with a 60%, let's go ahead and change that for Mackenzie. I could do so, and it'll apply for Mackenzie. So she only needs, in order to pass, she only needs 15 questions with a 60%. So you can make those accommodations there, and she'll earn the blue ribbon. Okay, so I believe we're going to go back to the webinar because I want to quickly talk to you about reporting, and I know we're running low on time, but I'll make it quick. So reporting for each tier, I've laid out for you each tier and what reports are good for them. So for tier 1, Standard Study Island, we have the class gradebook and the class comparison reports are really nice just to see holistically how your students are doing in the general population. Tier 2, since you're using tailored assignments, I recommend the assignment report. The trend report has a cumulative performance format that I recommend, because it lays out really nice for you cumulative performance across time. We also have the Blue Ribbon Report and the Statewide Comparison Report. These are actually good for all tiers. Blue Ribbon allows you to see the number of blue ribbons your students have earned. or mastered topics that they have. And then the statewide comparison compares your students to the class and to the state. Or I'm sorry, not to the class. It compares your students to the school, their grade level, and then the state, their grade level. So really nice reports there. For Tier 3, we have that NWEA MapLink report, which is just specific to that pathway. We also have the RTI report, which I'm going to show you in just a second, so I'm not going to give you too many details there. We also have the individual student report, because again, that individualized support, and the suggested topics, which are the topics that can pop up for the student, for your individual student. So now let's talk about the RTI report. So it applies to an individual student and topic, and it shows growth over time. And one other thing I want to call out, if you're looking for instructional resources, check out the teacher toolkit. We just put in some 2-part videos. They're really nice. But let's go ahead and look at this RTI report. I'm going to click on school reports here. Choose my RTI report. Now I'm going to choose my class, which is Tier 3. I'm going to choose my student, which is Josiah. I'll choose my program, which is your standards, grade level standards, and then I'm going to choose my subject. And then what specific skill have you been working on with the student? Mine is print and spoken words. So I picked the wrong one. Let's change that to print and spoken words. There we go. All right, so in order to see how they've been doing over time, I can see Josiah, and keep in mind this is my demo student. Over time, he has he started off with a 70%, which that was way before I knew I was doing this RTI workshop. And then he got 100. This is my demo student. But then let's just make this part realistic. He worked on the 5th, and for the past months I've been working with him, and now he's at an 80%. So he started at 50, and now he's at an 80, which is great. I can always print that for my records. But each time the student goes in and works on the topic, each time they get that ongoing assessment or practice, it's going to map out for you how they score, which is really nice. It also would include any building blocks the student has attained, which right now we don't have any. Now down here at the bottom, it tabulates within this nice table all the times the student has worked on the assignment. It also includes group sessions, which the session time isn't recorded. But if I needed more details about that, I can always look at the view, at the individual report that shows up here. And then here's print and spoken words. If I click on view sessions, I can easily see how the student performed and when, and I can look at those missed questions if I need to. Okay. So a really nice report there. So that is the RTI report. I'm going to just summarize since we are low on time. But basically, I hope from what you learned today, you can have enough to understand that Study Island does support response to intervention approaches at all tiers of instruction, which means you can use this as a tool to support your RTI implementation. And what it does is it really just allows you to dive in, differentiate, and support students, those struggling students, so that you can fill the gaps of their learning. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and end the recording because the questions here happen live, but this is where the recording will end. I do want to point you to the additional resources we have so that you're able to take advantage. We have the live workshops, which happens daily, so go ahead and check those out. We have recorded workshops through our YouTube page. Just search Edmentum Implementation Team, and you will see those, as well as this recording. Also, the What's New area on the Edmentum website. Check that out for any updates on Study Island or any other Edmentum products. We also have available to you the award-winning support team. They're available Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. You can call them, their number is here, email, or use this live I can't say that word, live support button to chat questions into them, all within this time period. Uh-oh. All right, and then finally, if you have any questions about pricing for NWEA or any other of our programs, go ahead and give our sales team a call. Their number is right here at the bottom. Thank you so much for joining. I'm going to end this recording.